still have nightmares. I still have a hard time. We still have a trial coming up next spring, so then I have to relive everything again. It's just reliving it over and over again, and all those emotions come back, and it's hard.
I am inside the Fremont County EMS building today with Brenda Dye. She is the coroner for Fremont County. A lot of people have watched our coverage of the Lori and Chad Daybell case.
Yes.
And you were telling me off camera that bar none, has been your most difficult case that you've dealt with.
By far my most difficult.
So you were involved in the investigation for Tylee and JJ and
Yes.
Tammy.
Yes.
I'm sure you're bombarded with questions about this case all the time. Anything you want to add as far as your perspective on the investigation, giving closure to these families?
Finally able to release JJ's body. By far my most difficult. It's just hard to imagine someone doing that to someone they care for and love. It was really hard, and especially I've got kids, and I just can't imagine that and what the families have had to go through.
The pictures of the bodies were shown in the courtroom.
Yes.
During Lori's trial, and Nate Eaton, who covered that story, it was it's images he'll never forget, is what he has said, and many others who were there in the courtroom have said that.
Yes.
You know, you've talked about how, as a coroner, you have to distance yourself emotionally.
Yes.
But was this one of those ones that was particularly difficult?
Yes.
For you?
It is, and I still have nightmares. I still have a hard time, and every time we have a new trial, we still have a trial coming up next spring, so then I have to relive everything again. It's just reliving it over and over again, and all those emotions come back, and it's hard. It's hard. A lot of cases are harder than others, but this has been really hard for me.
What's the number one question you get asked by just members of the public?
They asked if I was in on the autopsies, and they just thank me and ask me how I do it, how I was able to sit through that.
A lot of people might, like, the coroner doesn't perform autopsies.
No, we just make sure we get our decedents to the morgue to have the medical examiner perform those autopsies. We do sit in on them, though. I
was going to ask you. So yes. A lot of people might get confused and mix up a medical examiner with a coroner, but they're actually two different jobs entirely.
Correct. A medical examiner is a doctor.
And they're the ones who figure out how the person died, and then they report it back to you, and you pass it along to the family or the police or whoever needs to know.
Correct, yes. If it's undetermined, if we cannot determine a cause of death, then that's when we take our decedents for an autopsy.
Do you want to explain what is the role of a coroner?
The coroner responds to all unattended deaths, which means they weren't attended by a physician or they weren't directly under a doctor's care. So if they're at home or whatever it is and they pass away, then if they don't have a doctor's care directly over them, then the coroners respond to them. We make sure they get to the funeral home of family choice or on-call funeral home if they don't have a family choice. And then our job is to determine cause of death and also to certify the death certificate.
I want to talk some more about what interesting cases you've been involved with as a coroner. But before we do that, I want to go back and talk about, you have this 26-year history as an EMT. What got you interested in doing that?
I've always been interested in the healthcare profession. I was going to go the nursing way and then decided to get my EMT license, and I just love that. I love working in the field.
Was there one thing that, one experience you had that made you think, I'd like to do that?
I've just always wanted to be a caretaker and take care of people, and I like being outdoors in that setting, and the adrenaline being on the ambulance is, I think, suits me better than being in a clinic hospital setting.
And you live in Island Park.
I do.
So I would imagine, particularly during the summertime, there's probably a lot of calls you deal with where it's tourists.
Yes. We had the Sawtell call this summer where the man fell down the steep cliff of Sawtell up from the top. And that was quite challenging. It was, but very rewarding that we got him up and out of there in time and was able to get him to the hospital for care.
You have been coroner since 2019?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
What made you decide to run for county coroner?
I was just intrigued by, I love my EMT job of trying to save people, help people, get them to the hospital in time. And if that's not possible, then I like to go beyond that and be able to determine cause of death. Sometimes we're the last voice of the people who pass away. I like to give family closure. And I like investigating. I like the investigative part of it.
As the coroner in Fremont County, is that a part-time position?
Yes.
So,
It's considered, well, I'm full-time, but I can still it's considered part-time, so I can still do part-time EMS. So I can't do 2 full-time jobs in the county, so.
But you probably spend way more than 20 hours a week.
Oh yeah, I'm on call 24/7 unless I have one of my deputies cover.
As coroner, what is the most common cause of death that you deal with?
I would say probably cardiac, heart. A lot of elderly people are in Island Park, travel through Island Park. When people come to that high altitude with a history of cardiac disease, then a lot of times they pass away because of the altitude and certain things.
Aside from the Daybell case, what's
Yes.
what's another case that stands out in your mind as being particularly memorable?
So the first year I was put in office, my first 2 cases were people I know, and that was really difficult. So being put in, and the first 2 months, I had 2 cases of people I know. And then later that year was Tammy's case, Tammy Daybell's case. So 2019 was rough. Another rough one was, all suicides are rough. Those are hard, especially with the family members, because it is a preventable thing, and trying to explain that to the family and try to give them comfort and closure, that's a hard one. And I have 2 sons, and one of their friends ended his life like that, and it was hard. It was difficult.
Cases like that, are those ones where you have to go get some outside help just for your own mental health?
I do. We have some great counselors who deal with first responders, PTSD counselors. So. And
have those cases prompted you to do something in the county to make resources available to families?
Yeah, so we have some resources for survivors of suicide, and then the families can go get counseling, and just also suicide awareness, things like that.
What are some things you have learned just about the human body as coroner?
Sure, yeah, I'm very interested in the human body, and it's amazing how if one thing in your human body is off, it affects everything. It can affect whether you live, whether you die, whether, it can, one little problem can set your whole body off and turn into many problems. It's interesting what they can find in the blood when we send in our tox screens. We can do expanded panels to see what that person. So we rely a lot on the toxicology too that we do on the decedents.
Well, Brenda, I appreciate you taking a few minutes and talking about your role as coroner. Anything else that you think might be interesting for people to know?
The coroner is the only one that can arrest the sheriff.
Yes.
Which I've never had to do, thankfully and luckily.
Yeah.
But yes, when they told me that at first, I was quite surprised by that.